In this presentation titled Sustainable Human Resources Management, Functions and Applications, we will discuss the importance of sustainable human resources management for businesses and its core functions. Sustainable human resources management plays a vital role in enabling businesses to remain resilient, adaptable, and competitive in an increasingly complex and uncertain environment. Unlike traditional HR practices that focus on short-term productivity and rigid cost tracking, sustainability-oriented HR management focuses on the long-term protection, development, and continuity of human resources. A long-term perspective, equity, a balance between organizational goals and employee needs, and the promotion of employee well-being are fundamental principles underlying sustainable HR practices. When these principles are integrated into the business culture, strategic workforce planning, and recruitment processes, businesses are better prepared to prevent employee turnover, increase employee motivation, and ensure the continuity of critical competencies. Sustainability-oriented approaches in core HR functions, including performance management, training and development, and compensation systems, further reduce organizational risk and strengthen long-term performance. Performance systems that focus on continuous feedback and improvement help prevent burnout, while learning initiatives enhance the ability to adapt to change. Furthermore, fair and transparent compensation practices strengthen organizational justice, employee engagement, and sustainable organizational performance. Learning outcomes. The learning objectives at the end of this session are as follows. Participants will be able to identify the fundamental principles of sustainable human resources management and explain how sustainability-focused HR practices impact long-term organizational resilience and employee well-being. They will be able to identify key sustainable approaches in key HR functions, including workforce planning, recruitment, performance management, training, and compensation, and analyze their roles in mitigating organizational risk. Finally, they will be able to thoroughly evaluate ethical, participatory, and continuous improvement-based HR strategies that support employee engagement, talent retention, and sustainable organizational performance. Building organizational resilience through long-term human resources strategies in businesses requires a demanding process and commitment, moving from short-term productivity to creating sustainable value. Sustainable human resources management represents a strategic approach that balances organizational performance with employee well-being and long-term sustainability. From this perspective, human capital is not merely an operational input for businesses, but a critical strategic asset. Organizations that invest in people are better able to adapt to uncertainty and change. Sustainable HR management goes beyond traditional cost-focused management by emphasizing long-term employability, learning capacity, and workforce sustainability. Instead of viewing employees as replaceable resources, this approach recognizes their roles in preserving knowledge, skills, and organizational memory. Sustainable practices across recruitment, training, performance management, and compensation strengthen trust and commitment. As a result, HR management becomes a central mechanism for organizational resilience. This presentation focuses on examining core human resources functions through the lens of sustainability to highlight their contributions to long-term success. Traditional human resource management practices are primarily designed around short-term efficiency, cost reduction, and immediate performance outcomes. These approaches often prioritize numerical targets and productivity indicators over employees' long-term capacity and well-being. While they may generate quick and measurable results, they frequently fail to address issues related to human sustainability. This short-term orientation leads to several structural limitations within organizations. Inadequate long-term workforce planning increases workload pressure and raises the risk of employee burnout. Over time, high stress levels and limited development opportunities contribute to talent loss and declining organizational commitment. These outcomes demonstrate the limitations of traditional HRM and underline the need for more sustainable, human-centered approaches. Sustainable human resource management aims to manage human resources in a way that supports organizational goals while safeguarding employees' physical, psychological, and professional well-being over the long term. Rather than focusing solely on short-term efficiency, this approach emphasizes the sustainable use and development of human capacity. By doing so, organizations can create healthier work environments and more stable employment relationships. At its core, sustainable HRM focuses on long-term employability, the preservation of human capacity, and organizational continuity. These priorities enable employees to remain productive, adaptable, and engaged throughout different stages of their careers. As a result, organizations are better positioned to reduce risk, retain critical talent, and sustain performance in the face of change. Human resource planning plays a central role in sustainability by ensuring that organizations are prepared not only for today's needs, but also for future challenges. At its core, sustainable HR planning focuses on having the right people, with the right skills, at the right time. This forward-looking approach allows organizations to anticipate changes in workforce demand rather than reacting to problems after they arise. In this sense, HR planning becomes a strategic tool rather than a purely administrative function. By anticipating future workforce needs, sustainable HR planning helps prevent skill shortages that can threaten operational continuity and competitiveness. At the same time, it supports balanced workload design, reducing the risk of employee burnout and performance decline. When planning is aligned with long-term organizational strategy, human capital is protected, developed, and renewed over time. Ultimately, effective HR planning strengthens organizational resilience by balancing capability, continuity, and employee well-being. Traditional and sustainable human resource planning differ fundamentally in both perspective and purpose. Traditional HR planning is typically short-term and project-based, focusing primarily on numerical staffing needs required to meet immediate workloads. This approach is largely reactive, responding to vacancies and operational pressures after they emerge. As a result, it often overlooks long-term capability development and human sustainability. In contrast, sustainable HR planning adopts a long-term and strategic orientation aligned with the organization's future direction. Rather than focusing only on headcount, it is competency-based and emphasizes the continuity of critical skills and knowledge. This proactive and preventive approach anticipates future workforce needs, prevents skill shortages, and balances organizational goals with employee capacity. By shifting from reaction to foresight, sustainable planning strengthens resilience, reduces risk, and supports long-term organizational performance. Sustainable human resources planning utilizes a variety of analytical and managerial tools, including labor supply and demand analyzers, scenario-based planning, critical position and competency assessments, workload and capacity assessments, and demographic and generational analyzers. These tools enable organizations to anticipate future needs, manage uncertainty, and align human resources with long-term strategic goals. Core principles guide sustainable human resources planning by defining both its direction and limitations. A long-term perspective ensures that medium and long-term workforce needs are met by considering demographic changes and retirement trends. Simultaneously, competency continuity focuses on preserving and transferring critical knowledge to prevent organizational fragility. Respect for employee capacity, flexibility, adaptability, and balance form the human-centered foundation of sustainable planning. Flexible structures that balance organizational goals with employee well-being ultimately support the organization's resilience and long-term sustainability. Recruitment and selection processes are among the most critical functions of human resource management. This is because the decisions made during these processes shape not only short-term workforce needs but also the organization's long-term human structure, culture, and performance capacity. Traditional recruitment approaches have often aimed at finding the fastest and lowest-cost solutions. In such approaches, candidates' long-term organizational fit, development potential, and capacity to contribute sustainably have remained secondary considerations. Over time, this has led to sustainability risks such as high employee turnover, adaptation problems, and talent loss. The perspective of sustainable human resource management restructures recruitment and selection processes in a way that minimizes these risks. Sustainable recruitment and selection refers to an approach that aims not merely to fill current positions, but to attract employees who can adapt to the organization in the long term, continue to develop, and contribute in a healthy and sustainable manner. Within this perspective, the fundamental question shifts from, can this candidate perform the job today? To, can this candidate exist and thrive within this organization in the long term? Traditional recruitment and selection processes tend to focus on short-term position requirements, prioritize technical qualifications, and give limited attention to candidate organization fit. In contrast, sustainable recruitment approaches are aligned with long-term workforce planning and evaluate behavioral and value-based fit alongside technical competence. They also consider candidates' development potential and the impact of recruitment decisions on employee well-being. This shift highlights that recruitment is not merely an administrative selection activity, but a strategic decision shaping the organization's future human capital. Sustainable recruitment and selection are guided by principles such as long-term fit, fairness and equality, realistic job information, consideration of health and well-being, and a focus on development potential. Transparent, non-discriminatory processes and honest communication about job conditions reduce turnover and build trust. By emphasizing learning potential and sustainable employment relationships, organizations strengthen talent retention and long-term organizational resilience. Training and development activities are among the most fundamental functions of human resource management. In traditional approaches, training has often been addressed as periodic and limited practices aimed at closing short-term performance gaps. From the perspective of sustainable human resource management, training and development are not viewed merely as knowledge transfer, but as strategic processes that ensure the renewal of human resources and the continuity of organizational learning. Sustainable training, development, and learning management represent a systematic approach that develops employees' knowledge, skills, competencies, and learning capacity by considering both current and future organizational needs. Unlike traditional training models that rely on standardized programs delivered at fixed intervals and aim at short-term knowledge acquisition, sustainable learning emphasizes continuous and lifelong development. This approach enables employees not only to improve performance in their current roles but also to adapt to change, assume new responsibilities, and internalize learning as an ongoing behavior. As a result, sustainable learning management functions as a bridge between personal development and long-term organizational adaptability. Core principles such as continuity, needs-based design, accessibility and equality, learning work integration, and the learning organization approach guide sustainable training systems. These principles ensure that training initiatives are aligned with strategic goals, responsive to individual needs, and accessible to all employees. Sustainable learning systems prevent competency obsolescence, support internal promotion and talent pool development, and enhance employees' capacity to adapt to ongoing change. At the same time, they strengthen employee engagement, motivation, and knowledge sharing across the organization. Performance management is one of the most effective yet most debated functions of human resources management. Traditional performance systems, focusing on measurement, comparison, and short-term results, may temporarily increase output but often lead to burnout, decreased motivation, and weakened organizational commitment among employees. From a sustainable human resources management perspective, performance management is redefined not merely as a results-oriented control mechanism, but as a human-centered and developmental process. Sustainable performance management aims to monitor current performance in detail while preserving employees' long-term work capacity, learning potential, and well-being. This approach focuses not on how much an employee produces, but on how sustainably that performance can be maintained over time. Fundamental principles such as continuity and feedback, development orientation, fairness and transparency, balance, and employee participation are crucial in forming the foundation of sustainable performance management practices. Compensation and reward systems form the economic and psychological foundation of the relationship between employees and the organization. Traditional, performance-driven and highly competitive compensation models may deliver short-term results, but they often undermine perceptions of fairness, increase internal competition, and weaken long-term motivation. From a sustainable human resource management perspective, compensation and rewards are viewed as strategic tools that support employee well-being, fairness, and lasting organizational commitment. Sustainable compensation and reward systems aim to balance organizational economic realities with employees' living standards and long-term expectations. Rather than rewarding only the highest short-term performance, these systems emphasize secure, predictable, and fair income structures while recognizing contribution through continuity, responsible behavior, and shared values. As a result, compensation focuses not only on how much is earned, but also on how and why value is created. Core principles such as fairness and equity, transparency, long-term balance, and support for employee well-being guide sustainable compensation practices. In addition to fair and understandable pay systems, sustainable benefits such as flexible benefit packages, work-life balance arrangements, health support services, training opportunities, and social security contributions play a critical role. Together, these practices strengthen employee trust, commitment, and long-term organizational sustainability. Occupational health, safety, and well-being have traditionally been addressed primarily through legal compliance and accident prevention, often limited to meeting minimum requirements. However, from a sustainable human resources management perspective, occupational health, safety, and well-being are seen as fundamental elements for protecting human resources, ensuring organizational continuity, and sustaining long-term performance. This approach goes beyond preventing workplace accidents, aiming to support the physical, psychological, and social health of employees throughout their working lives. Thus, employee well-being is transformed from a secondary concern to a strategic priority. Sustainable occupational health, safety, and well-being management adopts a preventive, holistic, and participatory approach that addresses both physical and psychosocial risks. Core principles such as risk prevention, balanced workload design, employee engagement, and continuous improvement guide the design of healthier work environments. Practices such as ergonomic job design, work-life balance arrangements, stress prevention programs, and preventive health services support long-term work capacity. These practices are crucial in strengthening employee commitment, organizational resilience, and sustainable performance while reducing absenteeism and health-related risks. Career management is a core human resource function that shapes employees' development paths and long-term orientation within the organization. Traditional career approaches, which focus mainly on vertical progression, titles, and hierarchical promotion, have often resulted in limited opportunities, career stagnation, and talent loss. From a sustainable human resource management perspective, career management is redefined as a continuous and dynamic development process that enables long-term contribution rather than short-term advancement. Sustainable career management and talent continuity together aim to balance individual development with organizational sustainability. This approach expands career paths beyond linear models by including horizontal, cross-functional, and project-based opportunities, while emphasizing continuous learning and adaptability across different life stages. By aligning individual competencies and interests with organizational needs, sustainable career management supports broader employee participation and long-term engagement. Core principles such as long-term development, individual organization fit, flexibility, knowledge transfer, and transparency guide sustainable career practices. Tools including individual development plans, mentoring and coaching, talent pools, succession planning, and internal mobility ensure the continuity of critical competencies. As a result, sustainable career management reduces talent loss, strengthens employee motivation, preserves organizational knowledge, and enhances long-term organizational resilience. Employee participation in sustainable human resource management goes beyond task execution and includes employees' active involvement in decision-making, improvement processes, and shared organizational goals. By viewing employees as active stakeholders rather than passive labor, sustainable HEM strengthens commitment, supports innovation, and reduces resistance to change. In this sense, participation forms a core component of the social dimension of sustainability. Sustainable human resource management is grounded not only in economic and environmental goals but also in strong ethical principles, organizational justice, and social responsibility. Ethics in this context emphasizes respect for human dignity, transparency, accountability, equality, and the protection of personal data, while organizational justice shapes employees' perceptions of fairness in outcomes, decision-making processes, and interpersonal interactions. Addressing distributive, procedural, and interactional justice together enables the creation of lasting trust and sustainable employment relationships. Sustainable HEM also represents the internal application of corporate social responsibility by promoting fair compensation, safe working conditions, employee development, and inclusive policies. Ethics and justice-based HR practices such as codes of conduct, transparent evaluation systems, equal opportunity policies, and employee participation mechanisms help embed these values into organizational culture. As a result, organizations strengthen trust, reputation, stakeholder relationships, and long-term sustainable performance. Measurement and evaluation are essential to making sustainable human resource management meaningful, effective, and enduring. Sustainability in HEM cannot be achieved through intentions alone. It requires measurable, traceable, and continuously improvable practices. For this reason, measurement, reporting, and continuous improvement serve as the backbone of accountability, transparency, and strategic development in sustainable HEM. A comprehensive measurement approach combines both quantitative and qualitative indicators and examines practices at input, process, and outcome levels to reflect the dynamic nature of sustainability. Key indicators such as workforce retention, training effectiveness, employee engagement, health and safety, diversity, and ethical compliance provide insight into long-term HR performance. Reporting these results through transparent and ethical frameworks not only supports internal decision-making but also builds trust with stakeholders. Ultimately, ethical measurement and honest reporting ensure that sustainable HEM remains credible, reliable, and strategically aligned with organizational goals. Measurement, reporting, and continuous improvement transform sustainability from an intention into a living management practice. When organizations measure what truly matters, report it with transparency and ethics, and use insights to learn and improve, sustainable human resource management becomes not only accountable, but also resilient, credible, and future-oriented. In conclusion, the distinction between traditional and sustainable human resource planning underscores a fundamental transformation in how organizations manage their human capital. Traditional HR planning, which is predominantly short-term, project-based, and reactive, primarily focuses on numerical workforce balance and immediate operational requirements. While this approach may offer short-term efficiency, it often neglects the long-term preservation of competencies, employee capacity, and organizational resilience. As a result, organizations relying solely on traditional planning models face increased risks of skill shortages, burnout, and strategic fragility. Sustainable human resource planning adopts a long-term, strategic, and human-centered perspective. Rather than concentrating only on headcount, it emphasizes competency continuity, workforce adaptability, and the alignment of human capital with future organizational goals. By proactively anticipating workforce needs, preventing excessive workloads, and safeguarding employee well-being, sustainable planning supports both performance sustainability and human sustainability. This shift from a reactive to a preventive and foresight-driven planning approach enables organizations to secure institutional memory, strengthen resilience, and maintain long-term competitive advantage in increasingly volatile and complex business environments.